In Edwardian Britain, unemployment and homelessness was chronic. Despite this, time and again, those holding the power to govern citizens passed rules and regulations that criminalised the perceived social ills of vagrancy, begging, and the activities of all manner of street folk in towns and cities. In the early years of the 20th century, a reverend from Southport, England, set out on a journey disguised as a tramp. He believed that this was the only way that he and wider society could genuinely be informed of the degradation and misery that these people were suffering due to the ignorance of good and well-meaning people towards vagrancy. He was hopeful that the deplorable conditions he recorded would awaken all to the perilous existence many were both forced to live and doomed to die. You can find out about his experience of sleeping in one of Manchester's filthy and dangerous lodging houses, as well as a night in a wretched penny sit-up, or Preston's House of Despair as he calls it, in videos available on this channel. Today, you will discover what it was like to find yourself on the streets of Preston, England, in 1910, at night, jobless and homeless, with little money and even less hope that a passer-by would lend a hand to a man down on his luck by giving a few pennies for a night in a common lodging house. These were desperate and cheap places where few wanted to risk encountering thieves who would steal your clothes and boots, but if you had nothing to lose, and at least you wouldn't freeze to death on the mean streets. Find out how the dangers you could face alone on the streets didn't just include mugging from a thug for the little money you had, but the police too, for strict vagrancy laws meant that you would be hounded from street to street, never finding 5 minutes sleep in a doorway, unless you chose to resist. But then your night out on the streets would become a night in, but a night locked up in prison. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us to continue bringing the past alive. A night out. The words are said but lightly enough, and convey but little to most of our minds, but some hours passed in the clear starlit night, with maybe the moonlight rippling across the waters, a silvery wade to the far beyond. Some hours, thus, warmly clad, after a good hearty supper and a bulky packet of sandwiches for the early dawn. I speak of a very different night out. For weeks, through most of November, December and January, my mate had no work, nothing whatever to do, and the little savings of the summer having vanished, he had been living at a common lodging house, the homeless labourer's wretched substitute for home. From time to time he had managed to pick up an odd job or two, just bringing in a few pence or shillings. It was at Preston, for several days, he had been living on 1 penny a day, a ha'porth of bread, 1 big thick slice of white bread, and a ha'porth of duck, which is just all the odd scraps of all kinds of meat at the butcher's shop baked together in the oven. But yesterday he had to go without even that, and then only managed to get his night's lodging with his last 3 coppers through the kindness of the kip boss. With an empty pocket and a despairing, desperate heart, he walked about all day, seeking work and finding none. Ill-clad, the bitter raw wind pierced through his few garments, into his very bones and being. Fits of cold shivering shook his frame from time to time, whilst a hacking cough told its tale of the past. He turned into the doss house for an hour or 2 in the evening, making believe he had enough for his lodging, until after 9:30, when he was turned out into the wet, chilly streets once more. He hangs about and walks the streets in the centre of the town, trying to tell his tale to some of the passers-by, making another effort to see whether anybody will take pity on him or not. "Beg your pardon, sir, but I've got no money for my night's lodging. Would you give me a copper towards my doss?" But there is none to pity him. The city clocks strike 11. Soon the streets are full of expensively dressed men and women, with heavy gold chains, gold rings, gold bracelets and ornaments. He goes up to one after another, as well as he can, whilst evading the watchful eye of the policeman.
"Beg your pardon, sir. I've nothing for my lodging tonight. Would you give a poor fellow a copper for his toss?"
And they look on him as on a dog, and either deign no reply at all, or tell him in impatient tones, "I've got nothing for you." Then is the time, my well-dressed friends, when you may feel thankful that the policeman is so close at hand, and that the poor starved beggar is so starved, so cold, so weak. If he had one half the food and wine in him that you have, you would be knocked senseless on the road and robbed. And do you cry, "Shame"? Why, shame! Why should you not also suffer a little sometimes, as well as he? Why should he bear all the misery of cold, hunger, starvation, hopelessness, fear and scorn? The crowds have melted away, and the chances are getting less and less of that so much needed fourpence for shelter and food. So, fiercely, my mate turns down into the darkly lit Leighton Street. A nice place, as he says, for begging money for lodgings. "Is it true that it isn't safe for a well-dressed man to go down Leighton Street late at night?" asked a friend of mine. And the quick and ready answer was, "I've known the nights when if I'd met the likes of you there, and you'd refused me a night's lodging, I should have thought nothing of turning you upside down, and letting the money run out of your pockets. But mind you, I should have left you so that you couldn't call out for help. And now 'tis midnight, too late now to hope for help. The rain falls piteously. The pavements are wet and full of pools. A friendly doorway, with just a little shelter, looks inviting, so against that the outcast leans wearily, and seeks to forget his sorrows by a moment's sleep while he stands. But 'tis not 5 minutes before, tramp, tramp, and the bull's eye of the watchful policeman flashes on him. "Come on, me lad, let's have thee out of this. Keep her going, keep her going." The bitterness of it. Keep her going. Yes, but where? How those weary limbs and tired feet would keep her going, did but the light, warmth, and love of a true home gleam out in the darkness miles ahead. Then he would keep her going. But why? Why should he keep her going? Moving on to nowhere? Is this indeed a night in hell, where souls lost through pride, fullness, and fatness of living are hounded on by the police of hell forever? No, this is the grim reality of nightly experience in Christian England. For every night on the streets of our big towns, the Son of Man today hath not where to lay his weary limbs and aching head. And so, all through the age-long hours of night, until the dawn, the policemen keep him going. If to escape them he turns out towards the open country, the town police follow him till the county police are met. If he turns his back, he is still followed. The policeman will often turn round and down a side street, but only a few minutes and round again. And if the poor beaten tramp offers to stop, what are you hanging about for? Keep her going. And if he doesn't mind what he says, he is perhaps locked up for loitering with intent. And woe to him then if he happens to have about him an old key, or a penknife, or a piece of old candle, or a bit of wire, or a pair of pliers. As likely as not then he will get 7 days, or 14 days, or perhaps even up to 3 months in jail. And so down Gradwell Street he turns up and down and up and down, till the starved brain has photographed by the dim light every stone set and grid therein. Up and down and up, till the footfall of the knocker up sounds in the distant streets, and the labourers heavily plod off to the work of another day. Is this awful night at an end? May he now go home? Home? This poor man is homeless, an outcast, of less value, though strong and only 21, than a horse or a pig. His country has no need of him. His city can only keep him on the streets. So wearily, footsore, cold, hungry, and exhausted he goes to seek work. The irony of it! And do you wonder that when the dockyard ganger sees him, although he wants a man, he says, "No, we're full up, Johnny." He turns away desperate, and should he meet a little girl going to the shop with money in her hand, the temptation overgets him. He takes the money from the child and runs until he gets some stuff to eat. And do you wonder, could you punish him? Shall the poor ever cry in vain? Shall this drift downward never cease? Where is the man today who, to the tens of thousands of vagrants and casual labourers of our land, shall be as a hiding-place from the wind, as a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land?